One evening, in a house in a quiet neighborhood, a little boy was getting ready for bed. And as his mother was tucking him in, Charlie looked up at her and said, "Mommy, please don't forget to turn on the nightlight before you leave my room." Mrs. Cobb smiled at him and said, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll be sure to turn on the light. I won't leave you in the dark." The next day, Grandpa came for dinner. Charlie went and sat on his knee and said, "Grandpa, why is it that I'm afraid of the dark? And why do so many people I know seem to be afraid of the dark, too?" Grandpa looked at Charlie and said, "Not only are lots of people afraid of the dark, many people are afraid of the light." "Afraid of the light?" said Charlie. "Why would that be?" Grandpa said, "To understand that, I'm afraid I'm going to have to start at the beginning. In fact, at the very beginning. Once upon a time, there was a great king who was the King of Light. This great King of Light made a group of people, and he made them so that they could shine brightly just as he did. He called them his little Lightlings. He set the Lightlings in a beautiful garden that he prepared for them, a garden that was full of bright sunshine. And the Lightlings loved it when the king came to visit them at the end of the day. But then one day something terrible happened. The Lightlings decided to do what they wanted to do instead of what their king had commanded them to do. And the very second that they sinned, their light became dim, and they were filled with shame and with great embarrassment. And so they ran as fast as they could to get away from the king. From then on, they were afraid of the light, because they knew that wherever the light was, the king would be. And the king would see them in their shame. Now, after the Lightlings left the garden, the king began to remove his light from that garden. And the Lightlings moved further and further into the woods until they lived in a place that was almost completely covered in darkness. Often they would trip and fall, scuffing their knees and bruising themselves. It was awful living in the dreadful darkness all the time. In fact, they couldn't tell the difference anymore between night and day. Then one night, or perhaps it was even day, far off in the distance, they saw a blinding light shining through the trees. They thought that the light meant that the king was coming to find them to punish them for their sins. So most of the Lightlings began to stumble quickly away from the light. But some of the Lightling children were so amazed and interested in the light that they decided to see from where it was coming. So they set off and traveled for many miles. But as they moved, they saw the light shining brighter and brighter. And finally they came to a clearing in the forest. And in the middle of the clearing, they saw a father Lightling, a mother Lightling, and a little baby who was shining like the sun. The father Lightling said, "He is not my son. He is the son of the King of Light. The king has given him to us as a special gift, and there will be no darkness strong enough to hide his light, no darkness deep enough to send his light away." When they heard this, the Lightling children knelt down at the baby's feet, and they began to worship him in fear and reverence. When they stood up again, their own faces were shining. It was a reflection of the light that was coming out of the baby. They rushed back to their homes, to their friends and their families, as fast as their feet could carry them. The other Lightlings were frightened at the sight of them. They said, "What happened to you?" "We saw a baby who was shining with light. He is the son of the King of Light. He's given us his own son to be the light of the world." The Lightlings noticed that already there was more light in the forest. Now they could begin to see where they were going. They could run and play without bumping into trees or rocks and getting bruised. Yet some still hid from the light, while others realized they didn't need to be afraid anymore. They saw that living in the light was much better than the darkness they were used to. Grandpa looked at Charlie and said, "You see, Charlie, we're afraid of the dark because we were made to live in the light. And someday all of us who love this sun will live with him forever in heaven. There will be no moon, there won't be any stars or even a sun. There'll be no night lights, no lamps, no lanterns, not even candles." Charlie said, "Well, how can that be?" His grandfather replied, "In the place where the king's son now lives, the light that shines forever still comes from inside of him. And all who come into his presence will never be in darkness again." Every time that you see the sun or the moon, the stars, or every time you light a candle or turn on your little night light, remember the story of the child that the King of Light brought into the darkness of this world. And remember that he gave us this baby as a present. Charlie, as long as you remember that, you will never, ever, ever have to be afraid of the dark again.